Derek Wallace's laugh carried across the private dining room of the summit, Aspen's most exclusive restaurant, as he scrawled his signature across the divorce papers with the same gold pen he'd used to sign death warrants. His tattooed hand, the ornate sleeve visible beneath his tailored suit, rested possessively on Riley Knox's bare thigh, while his other hand held his phone to his ear. "Johnny, you should see it, these papers. My wife actually thinks I'll beg her to come back." He tossed the documents toward the server without looking. "She'll realize what she's lost when her credit cards stop working tomorrow. Give it a week, she'll be sobbing at my door." Riley traced the edge of his champagne glass, her red lips curving into a smile that matched his arrogance. The crystalline chandelier above them cast diamonds of light across their table, by illuminating the performance of a man who believed he was untouchable. What Derek didn't see, the black sedan parked across the street, windows tinted dark. Inside, Naomi Wallace pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone. The text she sent contained only 3 words, each one a piece of her shattered heart. "It's done, please." The response came immediately from the number she'd memorized and then deleted. "Good girl. The rifle is lowered. For now." Derek raised his glass to Riley, completely unaware that his signature hadn't freed him. It had armed the trap that would destroy him. The distance between his laughter and the scope that had been trained on his skull was exactly 847 yards. The distance between his arrogance and his ruin was now only a matter of time. Well, Naomi heard the creak of the bedroom door at 2:47 a.m. She'd been awake for hours, curled in the California king bed that Derek hadn't slept in for 6 nights straight. The Colorado mansion stretched around her in expensive silence. 12 bedrooms, none of them warm. She sat up slowly, her silk nightgown cold against her skin, and reached for the lamp. "I wouldn't." The voice came from the darkness near the window. Male, calm, the kind of calm that came from men who'd done terrible things and slept well afterward. Naomi's breath stopped. Her hand froze on the lamp switch. "Mrs. Wallace, my name is not important. What's important is that you listen very, very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." A figure moved into the sliver of moonlight coming through the curtains, tall, wearing a black wig that probably cost more than the bed she was sitting in. His face was obscured by shadow, but she could see his hands, one holding a suppressed pistol, the other holding a thick manila folder. "How did you get in here?" Her voice cracked. "Derek's security is very good. I'm better." He stepped closer, and she saw his eyes, pale, almost colorless. "Your husband has made powerful enemies, Mrs. Wallace. I represent one of them. We've decided Derek needs to pay for his transgressions. But we're not animals. We're giving you a choice." He dropped the folder onto the bed. It landed with a heavy thump that made her flinch. "Option 1. Tomorrow morning you file for divorce. You serve him the papers. You make it official, fast. No reconciliation, no second thoughts. Yeah, you go through with it completely." Naomi's hands clutched the silk sheets. "And if I don't?" The man tilted his head, almost sympathetic. "Then at exactly 8:47 p.m. tomorrow night, while your husband is having dinner at the summit with his mistress, a .338 Lapua Magnum round will enter his skull from 847 yards away. He'll be dead before the champagne glass hits the floor. And you, Mrs. Wallace, will be a widow." The room spun. Naomi pressed her hand to her mouth, tasting bile. "Why?" she whispered. "Why not just, if you want him dead?" "Because death is quick. We want Derek to suffer. We want him destroyed piece by piece. And you, Mrs. Wallace, are the key to his destruction." The man sat down on the chair across from her bed, the gun still pointed casually in her direction. "Open the folder." Her hands trembled as she pulled it open. Legal documents, court filings, federal subpoenas. "Do you know what spousal privilege is?" he asked. She shook her head, unable to speak. "It's a legal protection. A wife cannot be compelled to testify against her husband in criminal proceedings. As long as you're married to Derek Wallace, you are his shield. But the moment you're divorced," he smiled, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen, "you become our weapon." I don't understand. We have evidence that will put your husband in a federal supermax prison for the rest of his life. Trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering. Some of it's real. Some of it we've enhanced. But without your testimony, the case falls apart. With it? He shrugged. Derek dies in a concrete box, forgotten. And unlike a bullet, he'll suffer every single day until his heart stops. Naomi stared at the documents, her vision blurring. You're framing him. We're ensuring justice. Semantics. The man leaned forward. Here's what happens. You file for divorce tomorrow. You make it real. Derek will think you're jealous, acting out. He'll sign the papers because his ego won't let him believe you'd actually leave. The moment that divorce is finalized, the federal prosecutor, who works for us, will subpoena you. You'll testify, and Derek Wallace will spend the rest of his life in a cell. I won't do it. The words came out stronger than she felt. I won't send him to prison for something he didn't do. The man studied her for a long moment, then stood. He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly. See that red dot on the pillow next to you? Naomi's head whipped to the side. A tiny red point of light danced on the white silk, inches from where her head had been moments ago. My associate has had you in his crosshairs for the last 10 minutes. We could have killed Derek tonight. We could kill you right now, but we're offering you a choice, Mrs. Wallace. A choice your husband's victims never got. Her chest heaved. She couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. File for divorce and Derek lives. In prison, yes, but alive. Refuse and we kill him tomorrow night. But here's the part you need to understand, Mrs. Wallace. If we kill Derek, we also kill you. You become a loose end. Your parents become loose ends. Your sister in Boulder becomes a loose end. We tie them all up, neat and clean. Naomi felt something break inside her chest. Point. A physical sensation like ribs cracking. Oh, so let me simplify your choice. File for divorce and save his life. Or refuse and watch everyone you love die, starting with the man who's currently inside another woman at the Four Seasons. The words hit like a fist. She'd known about Riley. Of course she'd known. But hearing it spoken so casually, so cruelly, turned the knife deeper. You're a monster, she whispered. No, Mrs. Wallace, I'm a businessman. Your husband is the monster. I'm just the one holding him accountable. He moved toward the door, then paused. You have until 9 a.m. to file the papers. A lawyer will contact you at 8 a.m. with evidence prepared. All you have to do is sign and serve Derek. Do that, and he lives. Refuse. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The door closed with a soft click. Yeah, the red dot disappeared from the pillow. Naomi sat in the darkness, the folder heavy on her lap, and understood that her husband's arrogance had finally written a check she'd have to cash with her own soul. The clock read 3:12 a.m. In 17 hours, she would destroy her marriage to save her husband's life. In the distance, she heard Derek's Maserati pull into the driveway. He was coming home, finally, for the first time in a week. She wondered if he'd even noticed she'd been crying. He didn't. When Derek walked past their bedroom 20 minutes later, heading to the guest room he'd been using as his personal space, he was whistling. Naomi heard him on the phone, laughing at something Riley had texted him. She pulled the covers over her head and made a decision. She would file the papers. She would sign them. She would serve them. And then somehow, she would find a way to dismantle this trap from the inside. Because the man in black had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Naomi Wallace was helpless. She wasn't. She was just done being invisible. Derek held the signed divorce papers up to the light streaming through the summit's floor-to-ceiling windows, admiring his signature like it was a work of art. Look at that, baby. Freedom in ink. Riley laughed, the sound sharp and delighted, as she leaned across the table to kiss his neck. I can't believe she actually thought you'd fight for her. How pathetic. Naomi always was dramatic. Give her a week without access to my money, and she'll come crawling back. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through his banking app with deliberate slowness. Let's make this interesting. He tapped the screen multiple times. At each tap, another door slamming in Naomi's face. Credit cards, joint accounts, the household account she used for groceries, all frozen then closed. Riley peered over his shoulder, her perfectly manicured nail pointing at the screen. What about the cards she uses at that little bookstore she loves? Gaunt, Ba? Derek smiled. All of them. She wants to play independent woman. Let's see how independent she really is. His phone buzzed. A text from his consigliere. Boss, are you sure about this? The timing seems... Derek deleted it without reading the rest. Everyone was so paranoid lately. It was just a divorce. Women threw tantrums. They always came back. Should we post something? Riley held up her phone, angling it for a selfie. Just to let everyone know you're officially single? Not yet. Oh, let her twist on the wind a little first. Derek drained his champagne, already bored with the conversation. Naomi was yesterday's problem. He had shipments coming in from Nevada, a meeting with the Colorado suppliers, and Riley looked incredible in that dress. What would you do if someone you love publicly humiliated you like this? Comment your thoughts below. Across town, Naomi sat on the edge of a sagging mattress in the Starlight Motel, a place that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions. The neon sign outside flickered red and blue through the thin curtains, casting shadows that felt like accusations. She tried her credit card at 3 different hotels before reality hit. Derek had already cut her off. The ATM had swallowed her debit card with a cruel mechanical gulp. She'd paid for this room with the emergency cash she kept in her car. $73 for a night in a place that smelled like cigarettes and desperation. Her hands still shook. They hadn't stopped shaking since she'd watched Derek sign those papers through the restaurant window, his laugh carrying across the street like he was performing for an audience. The burner phone appeared at 11:47 p.m. Naomi had stepped outside to get air that didn't taste like decay when she saw it. A small black phone sitting on the hood of her car, illuminated by the flickering motel sign. No note, no explanation, just the phone. It rang the moment she picked it up. Mrs. Wallace? Or should I say Miss Wallace now? The ghost voice was exactly as she remembered. Calm, controlled, victorious. What do you want? Her voice cracked. To congratulate you. Yes, Derek signed the papers even faster than we anticipated. His arrogance is really quite remarkable. Papers rustled on his end. Now here's what happens next. In approximately 62 hours, you'll receive a federal subpoena. A very nice marshal will serve you at whatever address you are currently hiding in. Yes, we know where you are, Naomi. We always know. She looked around the empty parking lot, suddenly feeling exposed. When the feds ask you about Derek's warehouse operations, you'll tell them about the shipment that arrived on October 14th. You'll describe the containers. You'll mention the offshore accounts we've planted in your husband's name. Everything you need to say is in the notes app on that phone. Memorize it. Burn it into your brain. I won't send him to prison for something he didn't do. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, we'll kill him anyway. And this time, we'll make sure you watch. The ghost paused. Read the script, Naomi. Practice it. And remember, Derek chose Riley over you. He chose his ego over your dignity. He signed those papers without a second thought. Why are you still protecting him? The line went dead. Naomi sat on the curb outside room 7, the burner phone heavy in her hands, and opened the notes app. Lines of testimony filled the screen. Lies mixed with just enough truth to be believable. Every word was a nail in Derek's coffin. And somewhere across town, her husband was probably tangled in silk sheets with Riley, laughing about the wife who'd been foolish enough to love him. Derek stood in his private office overlooking downtown Denver, watching his empire spread across 3 monitors like a digital kingdom. Were real estate acquisitions in Boulder, shipping routes from Nevada, a nightclub chain that laundered money so cleanly it could have been blessed by a priest. He'd built this with blood and calculation, and some divorce papers weren't going to slow him down. Boss, we need to talk about Naomi. His consigliere, Leonard, stood in the doorway with the posture of a man about to deliver bad news. Derek didn't look up from the screens. There's nothing to talk about. She filed, I signed, it's done. That's exactly what concerns me. The timing is her being dramatic. Women do that. Derek finally turned, his tattooed arms crossed over his chest. She thought I'd beg. I called her bluff. End of story. Leonard stepped closer, lowering his voice even though they were alone. Derek, you've been married for 7 years. She files for divorce the same week the feds start sniffing around the warehouse operations? That doesn't strike you as convenient? The feds are always sniffing around something. It's their job. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages from Riley. Naomi's jealous and spiteful. That's all this is. What if it's not? Derek's eyes went cold. Gulfhonen. Then she'll regret it. But I know my wife, Leonard. She doesn't have the spine for anything more than filing papers she'll withdraw in a week when her little tantrum is over. Leonard opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. There was no reasoning with Derek when he was like this, convinced he was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Just be careful. Spousal privilege was relevant when we were married. Now it's irrelevant because she won't testify against me. She loves me too much. Derek turned back to his monitors, dismissing Leonard with silence. What Leonard didn't say, what he couldn't say without sounding paranoid, the divorce felt like the first move in a chess game Derek didn't know he was playing. Do you think Derek's arrogance will be his downfall? Let me know in the comments. 3 days later, Naomi answered the knock on her motel room door, expecting housekeeping. Instead, she found a woman in a dark suit holding a leather portfolio, flanked by a man built like a linebacker. Naomi Wallace? The woman's voice was professional, detached. Yes? I'm U.S. Marshal Patricia Hendricks. This is Deputy Marshal James Ruiz. She opened the portfolio, extracting a document with an embossed federal seal. Yin, you're being served with a subpoena to testify before a federal grand jury regarding the criminal activities of Derek Wallace. The paper felt like ice when Naomi took it. Her hands started shaking again. They'd barely stopped since the night the ghost appeared in her bedroom. I don't understand. I'm his wife. According to court records filed 72 hours ago, you're his ex-wife. The divorce was finalized this morning. Marshal Hendricks' expression didn't change, but there was something almost sympathetic in her eyes. Which means spousal privilege no longer applies. You can and will be compelled to testify. The world tilted. Naomi grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. The subpoena outlined the date and time of your appearance, when failure to comply will result in federal charges for contempt of court. Hendricks handed her a business card. If you need to arrange for legal representation, I'd suggest doing so immediately. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be in contact within 48 hours. What if I refuse? The words came out as a whisper. Then you'll be arrested and held in contempt until you agree to testify. That can be indefinite, Ms. Wallace. Deputy Ruiz spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly gentle. This isn't optional. They left her standing in the doorway, the subpoena trembling in her hands like evidence of her own betrayal. The legal language blurred together, but certain phrases jumped out with cruel clarity. Testimony regarding illegal interstate commerce, conspiracy to commit, racketeering influence corrupt organizations. The trap had sprung exactly as the ghost promised. Naomi closed the door and slid down against it, the industrial carpet rough against her legs. Her burner phone buzzed once. A text from a blocked number. Well done. Now memorize your lines. You go on stage in 11 days. Across town, Derek was closing a deal on a casino in Blackhawk when his lawyer called. Derek, we have a problem. Naomi's been subpoenaed by the feds. Derek laughed into the phone. So, she won't testify against me. She doesn't have a choice anymore. You're divorced. Spousal privilege is gone. The casino owner across the table watched Derek's expression change, watched the confidence crack just slightly at the edges. For the first time since signing those papers, Derek Wallace felt something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. It felt like doubt. Point. She still won't do it, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. His lawyer sighed. Derek, legally speaking, you just handed the federal government your wife as their star witness. Whatever they ask her, she has to answer. And if she refuses, they'll lock her up until she does. Derek ended the call. The casino deal suddenly felt irrelevant. He pulled up Naomi's number, the one he'd been ignoring for 3 days, and stared at it. His consigliere had been right. The timing was too perfect. But Derek Wallace didn't get where he was by admitting mistakes. If Naomi thought she could destroy him, she'd learn exactly what happened to people who betrayed him. What he didn't know, Naomi wasn't trying to destroy him. She was trying to save him from a trap they'd both walked into. One Derek had gift-wrapped with his own arrogance. Point. The raid happened at 4:37 a.m. Derek was in bed with Riley when his phone exploded with calls. His warehouse manager, his security chief, his lawyer, all screaming variations of the same nightmare. The feds were tearing through his Colorado Springs warehouse with a warrant the size of a phone book. He arrived 30 minutes later to a parking lot flooded with federal vehicles, their lights painting the dawn red and blue. FBI, ATF, Homeland Security. The kind of alphabet soup that meant someone was going to prison for a very long time. Agent Sarah Chen met him at the perimeter, her badge catching the morning light. "Mr. Wallace, we have a warrant to search these premises for evidence of human trafficking and conspiracy to commit acts of domestic terrorism." Derek's blood went cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." Chen gestured toward the warehouse entrance where agents were hauling out sealed containers. "We received a tip about suspicious shipments arriving on October 14th. Containers that weren't on any manifest. Containers with false bottoms and climate control systems designed to transport people." "That's insane. You run a legitimate shipping business with offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands that received wire transfers from known trafficking organizations." Chen pulled out a tablet, swiping through screens of bank records Derek had never seen before. "Accounts in your name, Mr. Wallace, with your signature on the incorporation documents." Derek stared at the screen. The signatures looked real. The account numbers meant nothing to him. Oh, but there they were. His name, his supposed authorization, transferring millions in blood money. "I've never seen those accounts before in my life." "That's what they all say." Chen's smile was sharp. "We also found documentation in your warehouse office, shipping manifests with coded language, communications with cartel operators, a burner phone with text coordinating drop-off locations." She paused. "And testimony from a witness who confirms your direct involvement." Derek's hands clenched into fists. "What witness?" "That information is sealed, but I can tell you this: she's very credible, very detailed, and very motivated to see justice done." She. The word landed like a punch. Naomi. Derek turned and walked back to his car before he did something that would get him arrested on the spot. His mind raced through the timeline, the divorce papers, the subpoena his lawyer mentioned, and now this raid with evidence that couldn't possibly be real, but looked perfect enough to bury him. His phone rang. "Leonard." "Tell me you're seeing this," Derek growled. "I'm watching it on the news." "Derek, this is bad. They're talking about terrorism charges. That's federal supermax if you're convicted." "I didn't do any of this." Derek slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "Someone planted this. Someone with access to my warehouse, my accounts, my—" He stopped. "Naomi." "Derek, I don't think—" "Who else knew about the October shipment? Who else had access to my office?" Derek's voice dropped to something dangerous. "She filed for divorce to get immunity. Then she fed the feds a story and planted evidence to make it stick. Say, she's trying to destroy me because I chose Riley. That seems extreme. Hell hath no fury, Leonard. She played me, made me think she was the victim while she was setting me up." Derek started the engine, his jaw tight. "Find out where she's staying, find out who she's talking to, and find out exactly what she told the feds." "What are you going to do?" Derek watched the agents carry another container out of his warehouse, each one another nail in a coffin someone had built specifically for him. "I'm going to make sure Naomi Wallace regrets ever thinking she could betray me. She wants to play in my world. She's about to learn the rules." He ended the call and pulled up Riley's number. "Baby, I need you to do something for me." What Derek didn't know, Naomi was in her motel room, watching the same news coverage with tears streaming down her face. The ghost had kept his promise. The frame was perfect, and in 11 days she'd be forced to stand in front of a grand jury and repeat the lies that would send Derek to prison for crimes he didn't commit. She'd saved his life by divorcing him. Now she had to destroy his freedom to keep him breathing. The burner phone buzzed. "Excellent work. See you in court." Naomi threw the phone against the wall, watching it shatter. But it didn't matter. The ghost had others. He always did. And Derek, blinded by rage and ego, was about to make everything worse by coming after the only person still trying to save him. Naomi found the flaw at 2 a.m., squinting at the burner phone's screen until her eyes burned. The ghost had been thorough, meticulous even, but he'd made one critical mistake. The shipping manifest for October 14th listed a container arrival at 3:47 p.m., but Derek's warehouse didn't operate on Tuesdays after 2 p.m. She knew because she'd handled his scheduling for years, back when he still pretended she mattered. The security logs would prove it. The container couldn't have arrived when the evidence was claimed. It was a crack in the foundation. Small, but fatal. If she could get Derek to pull those logs before the grand jury, if she could make him see he was being framed, maybe she could unravel the ghost plan without testifying. Maybe she could save Derek without destroying him. She tried calling. His number went straight to voicemail. Blocked. She tried his office, his consigliere, even the house they'd shared. Nothing. Derek had cut her out completely, and why wouldn't he? Plus, he thought she was the one framing him. Then she saw the invitation in her email, forwarded from an address she didn't recognize. The Colorado Business Alliance Gala. Derek would be there. He never missed a chance to display power. The email included a ticket, no message, no explanation. But Naomi knew of the opportunity when she saw it, even gift wrapped by someone who probably wanted to watch her fail. She bought a dress with the last of her emergency cash. Black, simple, nothing like the designer gowns that used to fill her closet. She looked like a woman who'd lost everything. She supposed that was accurate. The Grand Hyatt ballroom glittered with Denver's criminal elite dressed as businessmen. Naomi slipped through the crowd, searching for Derek's tattooed presence among the tuxedos and champagne flutes. She found him near the bar, which Riley draped on his arm like expensive jewelry. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. She pushed through the crowd, each step feeling like walking through deep water. Derek, he turned, and the look on his face was pure contempt. You've got nerve showing up here. I need to talk to you. It's about the evidence. There's just something wrong with... The only thing wrong is you. Derek's voice carried across the nearby tables, heads turning. You set me up, Naomi. You planted evidence, and now you're here trying to, what? Gloat? No, you don't understand. Riley stepped between them, her smile vicious. I think you need to leave. Derek doesn't want anything to do with his desperate ex-wife. Riley, move. This is important. Naomi tried to step around her, but Riley shifted, blocking her path like a well-dressed wall. Yee, security, Riley's voice rang out. This woman is harassing us. I'm trying to help him. Naomi grabbed Derek's sleeve, her voice breaking. The October 14th shipment. The manifest is wrong. The timing doesn't match your warehouse schedule. Derek, please, you have to pull the security logs before... Derek jerked his arm away. Before what? Before you perjure yourself in court? Before you send me to prison with your lies? He leaned close, his voice dropping to something cruel. I trusted you, Naomi. I gave you everything, and you repaid me by becoming a federal informant. That's not what happened. Two security guards appeared, their hands already reaching for Naomi's arms. The crowd had formed a circle now, phones out, recording her humiliation for social media posterity. Derek, please. Just listen for 1 minute. Get her out of here. Derek turned his back, pulling Riley close. And if she tries to contact me again, I want a restraining order filed. The guards gripped her arms, not rough but firm enough that struggling would only make the scene worse. Naomi felt tears burning her eyes as they walked her toward the exit, past tables of strangers who whispered behind their hands. Derek, she twisted in the guard's grip, desperate. The warehouse closes at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. Check the logs. The container couldn't have... The ballroom doors closed, cutting off her words. They deposited her on the sidewalk outside, the Denver night cold against her bare shoulders. Inside, she could see Derek through the windows, laughing at something Riley said. The picture of a man who just disposed of an inconvenience. Naomi stood there shaking, from cold, from rage, from the helplessness of watching a trap close around someone too arrogant to see the jaws. She'd tried. She'd risked the ghost's wrath to warn Derek, and he'd thrown her out like garbage. Her phone buzzed. Not the burner, her regular phone. A text from an unknown number. Nice try. But Derek's too proud to listen to the wife he threw away. See you in 7 days, Miss Wallace. Bring your testimony. Naomi looked up at the glittering windows of the gala, at Derek's silhouette surrounded by people who'd abandoned him the moment he was indicted. He'd called her desperate. Maybe she was. Desperate enough to save a man who hated her. Desperate enough to keep trying, even when he'd made it clear she was nothing to him. But desperation had limits, and Derek Wallace had just found hers. Derek's lawyer burst into his office at 7 a.m. without knocking, something Thomas Guerrero had never done in 15 years of keeping Derek out of prison. That alone should have warned Derek the news was catastrophic. The prosecution just released their witness list. Thomas dropped a folder on Derek's desk, his face ashen. Naomi's name is at the top, not just as a witness, Derek, as their primary witness. The entire case is built on her testimony. Derek barely looked up from his coffee. So, she won't testify against me. She's bluffing. She doesn't have a choice. Thomas's voice cracked. That's what I've been trying to tell you. That's what your consigliere tried to tell you. The moment you signed those divorce papers, you stripped away her spousal privilege. She's legally compelled to testify, and if she refuses, they'll hold her in contempt indefinitely. Then she'll refuse. Naomi would rather rot in a cell than betray me. Thomas stared at him like he was watching a man drown in shallow water. Derek, I need you to listen very carefully. I've reviewed the prosecution's timeline. The divorce was filed on September 18th. You signed the papers on September 19th. The divorce was finalized on September 22nd. The warehouse raid happened September 25th. Naomi was subpoenaed September 26th. So the timing is mathematically perfect. Thomas pulled out a timeline chart, red lines connecting dates like a murder board. Someone orchestrated this entire sequence. They needed Naomi divorced from you before they could use her testimony. They needed her vulnerable, isolated, and legally exposed. Derek's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Yes, think about it, Thomas continued, pacing now. Why would Naomi suddenly file for divorce after 7 years? Why would she do it days before the biggest federal investigation into your operations? Why would she? He stopped, a realization hitting him. Derek, did Naomi have any reason to know about the October 14th shipment? She didn't work for me anymore. I cut her out months ago. Exactly. She wouldn't have known about that shipment. She wouldn't have known about the offshore accounts. She wouldn't have known any of the details in the federal indictment unless someone told her. Thomas leaned on the desk. Someone fed her information and forced her to file for divorce. Then they used her as a weapon against you. Derek set down his coffee, his tattooed fingers drumming against the mahogany. Well, you're saying she's working with someone. I'm saying she's being used by someone. There's a difference. Thomas opened another document. I pulled the warehouse security logs you asked for last week. You were right. The warehouse closes at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. Has for 3 years. The container arrival listed in the evidence? 3:47 p.m. Impossible timing. The pieces started clicking together in Derek's mind, slowly, reluctantly. Naomi at the gala, desperately trying to tell him something about the timing. Naomi's face when he'd thrown her out, not angry but terrified. The divorce papers arriving the same week everything fell apart. She tried to warn me, Derek said quietly. At the gala, she said something about the warehouse schedule. And you had her thrown out. Thomas's voice held no judgment, just exhausted resignation. Derek, whoever set this up knew exactly how you'd react. They knew you'd think Naomi betrayed you. They knew your ego would blind you to what was really happening. Derek stood, walking to the window overlooking the city. His empire spread below him, businesses, properties, power built on fear and respect. But respect meant nothing if you were rotting in a supermax cell. If Naomi's being forced to testify, who's forcing her? I don't know, but they're good, professional, the kind of people who plan operations months in advance. Thomas closed the folder. The grand jury convenes in 6 days. When Naomi takes that stand, she'll repeat whatever script they gave her. The evidence is planted, but her testimony will make it credible. And you, Derek, Well, signed the papers that made it all possible. Derek's reflection stared back at him from the window glass. A man who'd built an empire on reading people, on staying 3 steps ahead, on never showing weakness. And he'd been played like an amateur. Can we stop her from testifying? Not legally, she's under subpoena. Thomas hesitated. There are other ways, but I'd advise against them. If anything happens to Naomi now, you'll be the first person they investigate. It would only make things worse. Derek turned back to his lawyer. So I'm supposed to just sit here and wait for my ex-wife to send me to prison? Your ex-wife who you threw out of a gala while she was trying to save you, Thomas corrected quietly. Yeah, Derek, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Point, unless you can figure out who's really pulling the strings before the grand jury convenes. After Thomas left, Derek sat alone in his office, staring at the divorce papers he'd signed with such arrogance. He'd thought he was calling Naomi's bluff. He'd thought he was teaching her a lesson about crossing him. Instead, he'd walked straight into a trap designed specifically for men like him. Men too proud to listen, too powerful to believe they could be outmaneuvered. But Derek Wallace hadn't survived this long by accepting defeat. If someone was using Naomi as a weapon against him, he'd find out who. And then he'd remind them exactly why people feared his name. What he still didn't understand, Naomi wasn't his enemy. She was the only person still fighting to keep him alive. The meeting location came via text at midnight. Confluence Park. 2 a.m., come alone. Naomi stood in her motel bathroom, staring at the small recording device she'd bought from an electronics store in a sketchy part of Denver. It was the size of a thumb drive, designed to look like a pendant on a necklace. The clerk had asked no questions when she paid in cash. Her hands shook as she clasped it around her neck. This wasn't for the feds. They'd use it to bury Derek deeper. This was insurance. Proof that she'd been coerced. Proof that the ghost had orchestrated everything. If she was going down, she was taking him with her. The park was empty when she arrived, the Platte River reflecting moonlight like liquid silver. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps on the gravel path, measured and confident. Ms. Wallace, right on time. The ghost emerged from the shadows, his pale eyes catching the streetlight. He wore the same expensive suit, the same cold smile. I trust you have been practicing your testimony? I want this to end. Naomi's voice came out steadier than she felt. I've done everything you asked. I filed for divorce. I cut Derek off. I'm prepared to testify. Just tell me when this is over. Over? The ghost laughed, a sound without warmth. Naomi, this is just the beginning. The grand jury is merely Act 1. The trial will take months, years if Derek's lawyers are competent. You'll testify again and again, each time driving the nails deeper into his coffin. You said he'd go to prison. You said that was the plan. And it is, but did you think it would be quick? Clean? The ghost circled her slowly like a shark. Derek Wallace destroyed lives, Naomi. He deserves to suffer the way his victims suffered. Slowly. Publicly. Watching everything he built turn to ash. Naomi's hand drifted to the pendant at her throat, feeling its weight. The evidence you planted, the October 14th shipment, the timing's wrong. Derek's warehouse closes at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. The ghost stopped walking. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Surprise, then amusement. You noticed that? Clever. He pulled out a silver cigarette case, lighting one with practiced ease. It doesn't matter. Your testimony will establish that Derek sometimes kept the warehouse open off hours for special shipments. You'll testify that you saw him do it personally. The jury will believe you over some security log that can be faked. But it's not true. Truth is what the jury believes, Naomi. Point. And they'll believe the tearful ex-wife who was brave enough to come forward. He exhaled smoke into the cold air. You want to know the beautiful part? The container itself is real. I actually did ship it, had it rerouted through Derek's warehouse network using his codes, his manifests, his signature. The only fake part is the contents. Derek thought he was moving electronics. We made sure he was moving evidence of trafficking. Naomi's blood went cold. You're admitting you framed him. I'm admitting I outmaneuvered him. There's a difference. The ghost stepped closer, his voice dropping. Derek Wallace isn't innocent, Naomi. Maybe not of this specific crime, but of others? Absolutely. The drugs, the extortion, the bodies that disappear, all real. We just gave the feds a crime they could actually prosecute. Think of it as creative justice. Justice isn't supposed to be creative. Her voice shook with barely contained rage. It's supposed to be true. How naive. The ghost flicked ash into the river. Let me tell you exactly how this works. The offshore accounts, created using financial documents I stole from Derek's real operations and modified. The shipping manifests, based on Derek's actual trafficking boots, just enhanced. The burner phone they found in his office, planted by someone on his own security team who owed me a favor. Every piece of evidence is a perfect blend of truth and fiction. Even Derek's own lawyers won't be able to tell where reality ends and our narrative begins. Why are you telling me this? Naomi demanded. Because you need to understand how thoroughly you're trapped. Because in 4 days, you'll stand before that grand jury and deliver your lines perfectly, knowing that every word is designed to imprison a man who may not be guilty of this particular crime, but deserves imprisonment nonetheless. He leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive like everything about him. And because even if you tried to recant, who would believe you? The scorned ex-wife suddenly developing a conscience? They'd think Derek got to you. They'd charge you with obstruction. The ghost checked his watch, a platinum Rolex that probably cost more than the motel where Naomi was hiding. Memorize your testimony, Naomi. Practice it until you can deliver it in your sleep. And remember, if you deviate from the script even slightly, Derek doesn't go to prison. He goes to the ground, along with everyone you love. He walked away, with his footsteps fading into the darkness, leaving Naomi alone with the recording device burning against her chest like a brand. She waited until she was certain he was gone, then pulled out the pendant with shaking hands. The tiny red light confirmed it had captured everything, every confession, every detail, every arrogant admission. Back in her motel room, Naomi uploaded the recording to a cloud storage account she'd created under a false name, then buried the device behind the bathroom mirror. Not the perfect hiding spot, but good enough. The ghost thought he'd trapped her completely. But he'd made the mistake every arrogant man eventually made. He'd underestimated the woman he'd backed into a corner. Naomi had proof now, proof she'd been coerced, proof the evidence was planted, proof of the entire conspiracy. She just had to survive long enough to use it. If you've ever been underestimated, hit that like button. Let's show them what happens when they count us out. The federal courthouse felt like a mausoleum, all marble and cold justice, the kind of building designed to remind you how small you were against the weight of government power. Naomi sat in the witness chair, her hands folded on the table in front of her to hide their shaking. Across from her, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Bradford arranged his files with the precision of a man who'd sent dozens of people to prison and planned to add one more today. Derek sat in the corner with his lawyer, forbidden from speaking, but allowed to observe. His eyes burned into her like laser sights. She could feel his hatred from across the room, thick enough to choke on. Ms. Wallace, thank you for appearing today. Bradford's voice was smooth, practiced. I know this is difficult, testifying against your ex-husband. Former husband, Naomi corrected quietly. The distinction mattered. It mattered more than Bradford could possibly know. Of course. Let's begin with the October 14th shipment. You stated in your preliminary interview that you had knowledge of unusual containers arriving at Mr. Wallace's Colorado Springs warehouse. Is that correct? Naomi took a breath. This was it. The tightrope. One wrong word, and Derek went to prison for crimes he didn't commit. One right word, and the ghost would know she'd betrayed him. I stated that I was told about unusual containers. I never personally witnessed them. Bradford's eyes narrowed slightly. Told by whom? By the person who forced me to file for divorce. Naomi met his gaze steadily. The person who broke into my home, held a gun to my head, and threatened to kill my husband if I didn't cooperate with this prosecution. The room went silent. Derek's lawyer sat forward. Derek himself looked like he'd been punched. Bradford recovered quickly, his professional mask sliding back into place. Ms. Wallace, are you recanting your previous statement? I'm clarifying it. I was given information about Derek's business operations by a third party. Information I had no way of verifying. Information I was told to memorize and repeat under oath. Who gave you this information? He calls himself the Ghost. I don't know his real name. He never showed me identification. Naomi pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket, a printed screenshot from the cloud storage. But I do know he admitted to planting evidence in Derek's warehouse. I have a recording of that confession. Bradford stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Your Honor, I need a recess. Sit down, Mr. Bradford. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. Ms. Wallace, you're under oath. Are you telling this court that you were coerced into providing false testimony? Yes, Your Honor. I was told that if I didn't file your mail for divorce and testify against Derek Wallace, my husband would be assassinated. I was given a script. I was told what to say about the October 14th shipment, about offshore accounts, about trafficking operations. None of it was information I obtained firsthand. All of it came from the Ghost. Derek stood, his lawyer grabbing his arm to pull him back down. His face had gone pale beneath his tattoos, the pieces finally clicking together in a way that must have felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Bradford tried again. Your Honor, the witness is clearly— I said, sit down. The judge turned back to Naomi. This recording you mentioned, do you have it with you? I have access to it, Your Honor. I can provide it to the court. Naomi's voice strengthened. I can also provide details about the Ghost shell companies, the ones he used to create the fake offshore accounts in Derek's name. Shell companies? Bradford looked genuinely confused now, his prosecution falling apart in real time. Yes, point. The accounts in the Cayman Islands that appear to be in Derek's name, they were created using stolen financial documents and routed through shell companies registered in Delaware. Companies that don't actually exist, except on paper. Naomi pulled out another sheet, research she'd done during sleepless nights in that motel room, tracing financial threads with the desperation of a woman with nothing left to lose. Companies that all trace back to a single investment firm based in Chicago, Titan Ventures. She watched Bradford's face carefully. If the Ghost had someone inside the U.S. Attorney's office, Bradford's reaction would tell her. But Bradford looked genuinely shocked, which meant either he was an excellent actor or he'd been played just as thoroughly as Derek. Your Honor, I'd like to request protective custody for Miss Wallace. Derek's lawyer stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. If what she's saying is true, she's in immediate danger from this Ghost character. Agreed, the judge said. Ms. Wallace, you'll be placed in federal protection until we can verify your claims. Mr. Bradford, I'm suspending these proceedings pending an investigation into allegations of evidence tampering and witness coercion. And someone find me everything we have on Titan Ventures. The room erupted. Prosecutors scrambled. Federal marshals moved toward Naomi. But all she could see was Derek, standing frozen in the corner, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. She'd saved him. Again. But this time, he finally knew it. A marshal touched her elbow. Ms. Wallace, we need to move you now. Naomi stood, her legs somehow steady despite everything. But as they led her toward the door, she passed Derek. Their eyes met for just a moment. His filled with something that might have been regret, hers filled with exhaustion. The warehouse closes at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, she said quietly. I tried to tell you. Then the marshal swept her out of the room, away from the husband she'd destroyed her life to save, away from the prosecution that had collapsed like a house of cards, toward whatever came next. Behind her, Derek Wallace sat down heavily in his chair, his empire intact, but his world fundamentally changed. He'd called her desperate, weak, a woman scorned. He'd been wrong about all of it. The Ghost's real name was Marcus Brennan, heir to a shipping empire Derek had dismantled 7 years ago in a hostile takeover that left the Brennan family bankrupt. The feds found him 3 days after Naomi's testimony, holed up in a penthouse in Chicago with enough evidence of conspiracy and witness tampering to put him away for 30 years. Titan Ventures collapsed like dominoes, revealing a network of revenge that had been years in the making. Derek was cleared of all charges by the end of the week. He found Naomi in a safe house in Boulder, a nondescript apartment with federal protection outside and no future inside. She was packing a small suitcase when he knocked. The marshals had let him through after his lawyer made calls and pulled strings. Derek Wallace always got what he wanted, even when what he wanted was a conversation with the woman he'd destroyed. Naomi. He stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow, despite his expensive suit and tattooed confidence. The arrogance had cracked, leaving something almost human underneath. "We need to talk." She didn't turn around, just kept folding clothes. "There's nothing to talk about, Derek. There's everything to talk about." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I know what you did. I know you saved my life. I know you went through hell because of me, and He paused, the words clearly difficult. "I'm sorry for not listening, for not trusting you, for throwing you out of that gala when you were trying to warn me." Naomi finally turned to face him. She looked tired, older than her years, like someone who'd survived a war. "Is that what this is? An apology tour?" "It's me trying to make things right." Derek moved closer, his voice softening in that way he used to use when they were happy, back when she still believed his tenderness was real. "Come home, Naomi. We can fix this, renew our vows, start over. I'll be better this time, I promise. No more Riley, no more—" "No." The word came out flat, final. Derek blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Derek. I'm not coming back. I'm not renewing anything. I'm not giving you another chance to treat me like I'm invisible." Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it between them like evidence in a trial. "This is a copy of the recording. The ghost confessing. Everything. I'm giving it to you as insurance in case Brennan's lawyers try anything." Derek took the drive, confusion clouding his features. "Naomi, I don't understand. You saved me. You risked everything for me. Why would you—" "I saved you because despite everything, I loved you." Past tense, Derek. Loved. Naomi's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through it. "I divorced you to keep you alive. I moved into a motel that smelled like cigarettes and regret. I memorized lies I was supposed to tell under oath. I wore a wire to meet with a man who could have killed me. I did all of that to protect you. And I'm grateful. But you never trusted me." The words burst out of her, raw and angry. "When I showed up at that gala, desperate to warn you, you had me thrown out. You called me desperate. You thought I was the enemy. After 7 years of marriage, you didn't know me well enough to realize I would never betray you." Derek's jaw tightened. "I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to believe the worst of me because your ego couldn't accept that I might leave you for any reason other than spite." Naomi zipped her suitcase closed with sharp, decisive movements. "Point. You chose Riley over me every single day of our marriage. You chose your pride over my warnings. And when I needed you to just listen for 1 minute, you chose to humiliate me instead." "Naomi, please." Derek reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for another chance." "No, Derek, you're asking me to forget. There's a difference," we groped. She picked up her suitcase, walking toward the door. "You want to forgive me, like I'm the one who did something wrong? Like filing for divorce to save your life was a betrayal instead of a sacrifice? You still don't get it." Derek followed her into the hallway, desperation replacing his usual confidence. "Then help me get it. Tell me what you need. I'll do anything." Naomi stopped at the elevator, her finger hovering over the button. When she turned back to him, tears tracked down her face, but her voice was steady. "I needed you to trust me. I needed you to respect me enough to listen when I was trying to save you. I needed you to love me the way I loved you, completely, without conditions, without mistresses, without making me fight for scraps of your attention." She pressed the button. "But you couldn't do any of that. And now it's too late." "It's not too late. We're divorced, Derek. You signed the papers, remember? You signed them while laughing with your mistress, so certain that I'd come crawling back." The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. "Well, I'm not crawling, I'm walking, and I'm not looking back." Derek pulled the divorce papers from his jacket. He'd been carrying them around since his lawyer showed him the timeline, evidence of his own stupidity. "These don't have to be final. We can—" They are final. I filed them to save your life, but I'm keeping them because you taught me something important. Naomi stepped into the elevator, her suitcase beside her. You taught me that I deserve better than a man who only values me when I'm gone. Better than someone who sees love as a weakness instead of a strength. Better than you, Derek Wallace. The elevator door started to close. Derek jammed his hand between them, forcing them back open. Where will you go? Somewhere you're not. She removed his hand gently but firmly. Goodbye, Derek. I hope you find someone who can live in your shadow. I'm done being invisible. This time, when the doors closed, Derek didn't stop them. He stood in the hallway holding the divorce papers he'd signed with such arrogance. As the papers that had nearly destroyed him, the papers that now represented the only honest thing in his entire marriage, an ending he'd earned. His phone buzzed, a text from Riley. Where are you? I'm bored. Derek deleted the message without responding. Then he deleted Riley's number entirely. It felt like closing a door years too late. He walked back through the safe house one last time, seeing the cheap furniture and government-issued blankets where Naomi had hidden while he'd been with Riley, oblivious to the sacrifice being made in his name. He saw the motel receipts in the trash, the burner phone shattered in pieces, the evidence of a woman who'd lost everything to save a man who hadn't deserved saving. Derek Wallace had built an empire on fear and power and ruthless calculation. But he'd lost the only thing that mattered because he'd been too arrogant to see its value until it was gone. In the parking lot below, Naomi climbed into a waiting car, not a federal vehicle, just a regular taxi taking a woman to the airport, to a new city, to a new life, to somewhere Derek's name meant nothing and his mistakes couldn't follow. She didn't look back at the building, didn't spare a thought for the man still standing in the hallway, finally understanding what it meant to be alone. If you believe loyalty deserves respect and nobody should be mocked for loving someone, hit that subscribe button. Only people like Derek won't. Comment. Naomi deserves better if you stand against men who treat their partners like they're invisible. Show me you're not like the Rileys and Dereks of the world. People who take without giving, or who mock instead of cherishing. If you've ever been underestimated, undervalued, or made to feel small by someone who should have lifted you up, this story was for you. Subscribe to stand with everyone who's walked away from people who didn't deserve them. Naomi Wallace had filed for divorce to save Derek's life. She was staying divorced to save her own. And somewhere in Colorado, a mafia boss who'd always gotten everything he wanted finally learned the cost of taking someone for granted.